I'm William Sibley, here with my brother Bob and cousin Burns Miller. We're on Wimbledon Way in Big Cove at the Holmes Cemetery. The earliest burial that we have here is of Richard Holmes, who died in 1818, and he was a soldier in the American Revolutionary War. His wife was Elizabeth McGahey. She was buried here in 1840. This is a large cemetery that was deeded in 1854, but there were burials here before then. And the deed says that nobody can be buried here after 100 years have elapsed. The last burial that we could find is of a McKay, and he is akin to Burns Miller. These rock graves that are right out here to my left, we assume that these had to be either Scrampshires, Moores, McGahays, Broads, Millers, Sis, and Holmes, and maybe others. We do know that those people are buried here because we found obituaries for them, but we have not found stones for them.
What about the church here?
Okay, thank you. There was a church and school here. It was a one-room school. Our mother went to school here from the first grade through the fourth, and then they transferred down to, well, it was a Big Cove school, but it went by the name of Campground. And the students, after they left Campground, went on to Gurley to the high school. And my mother went here, as I said, for 4 years. She had a different teacher each year. The first one was Jack Crowson. The second one was Lady Hooks. The third one was Nancy Scrampshire. And I'll have to rely on my brother to tell me who was the fourth one. Do you remember? Well, right now that won't come to me. But they were all Big Cove people except Mr. Crowson lived in Maysville. The church that was here started out as a primitive Baptist, and they called themselves the Old Baptists, in quotation marks. And they said that any Protestant group could meet here as long as they didn't conflict with the services of the Old Baptists. They only met one Sunday a month and the Saturday night preceding that. And most of the people, including my mother, who went to church at the Cumberland Presbyterian, after the weather was so bad, they would just all go to church here, so they had pretty big church services. And there was a Methodist church that she always said was located right across the road, which would have to have been right over here. And they had a big church, but they always met with the Baptists. And after that, after the church closed, I think the church and school both closed about 1918. And the burials had ceased about 1949, I believe. Is that right, Birds? When the McKay was up here.
Right, I think that was what we call Mama Cave.
Yeah, okay. About 1949, right?
Yep. She was the last burial here.
Yeah, I mentioned it a while ago, and that's the reason I was not quite sure. Our great-grandfather Sadler was buried here in 1937. 38, thank you.
What about the messengers? Samuel Miller messenger.
Okay. The history of this mentions some of the leaders as being messengers, and the best I could determine, they would go to the meetings at other places, and maybe even here at Holmes too, and it was their duty, I guess, to be a delegate. They would bring the news back of what occurred at those meetings. Samuel Miller who is Burns's great-great, or three greats, grandfather.
I really have to figure it up.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of those two.
Okay. He was a messenger in this church, but his brother, we think that maybe they were brothers, was our ancestors, and they were elders in the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. Then Burns also had people in that church too, the same family Miller line and McGahey line as we have. I want to say that Burns is the one who got the people together here a few years ago and cleaned this out. It was a wilderness. And he brings the people here together every year on the first Saturday in May. And we have a big cleanup day that day and eat lunch and share stories, so forth. And he deserves a lot of credit for doing that. Okay. This is a tombstone that belongs to my great-great-grandparents, Moses Miller and Rebecca McGahey, and also our photographer out here is a great-great-grandson of them. And right here, on the back of this stone, which is for the same couple, it lists the children of them. And they are James Pat Miller, Mary Adeline Miller, John Wesley Miller, who is my family line, Albert Ted Miller, Margaret D.C. Miller, William Alex Miller, Burgess McGahey Miller, who is the great-great-grandfather of Burns, who is filming this. I have a little Martha C.T. Miller, Andrew Miller. I can't make out this last one right now. The wind's blowing leaves around.
Is that Duncan Hunter?
It's something D.H. Miller, so.
Yeah, that's D.H. Miller.
Okay. Very good. Now the oldest child in this family still has several descendants here in Big Cove. And he was born in 1825, died in 1906, and that is James Patton Miller, known as Pat. There's a stone right here for A.W. Larkin Miller, who was born in 1843 and died in 1862. And he was a Confederate veteran, but I don't know if he died in the war. Do you know that, Burns?
Yes, he died. We don't know where.
Okay, but I noticed it does have a Confederate CSA here. This is a stone of Mary Ann Miller, the wife of Elias Hodges. Mary Ann was in our family, and we don't think that her husband is buried in this cemetery, but he was related to the Moores, and some people refer to this cemetery as Moore Chapel. So it's very possible that he is buried here in one of these unmarked graves. In front of us right here are two McGahey stones, and they were in the Confederate War, in the Civil War. And over here, you want to turn your camera this way. This is a stone of James McGahey, who was born in 1790 and died in 1852, and he married a Miller. The McGaheys and the Millers are both relatives of the three of us who are here today. And here's a stone that's on the ground. Let me see. That's why. Okay, this is the wife of James McGahey. It's kind of hard to read because it looks like it's faded out, but looks like she was born in 1808 maybe, and died in 1870 something. Kind of hard to read that. This is the grave of Burns Miller's great-grandmother, who was known to him as Mama Kate. Her name was Kate McKay. She was born 1862. She died in 1950. And if you remember, there were no more graves here after 1854. So she was probably the last burial here.
Yeah, I think she was.
Right here are Archie McKay and Maddie Lou McKay, and they are relatives of hers. This is the grave of my great-grandparents, William Alfred Sadler, born in 1852, died in 1938, and his wife was Julia Clinton, born in 1850, and died in 1902. So he was a widower for a long, long time. And over here to my right is his brother, John Benjamin Duncan Sadler. And I don't know if we can get a date on that or not. Died in 1850, born in 1850.
In 1901.
Died what year? 1901?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the grave of Samuel Miller, who was in the War of 1812. He's the great-great-great-grandfather of Burns Miller, who is filming this right now. And he was born in 1780, died in 1860. And these people back here are the descendants of him. How about this one over here, Henry Miller?
That's John Houston Miller's son.
Okay, John Houston Miller's son.
And John Houston Miller was Samuel Miller's son.
Okay, here's John Houston Miller, born in 1828, died in 1897. This is Eunice, known as Nancy Miller, born in 1827 and died in 1892. This is Lucy Miller Springer, born 1867, died in 1943.
She married Dick
And I believe the
Scripture.
shade's going to take this one out. Who is this stone, Burns?
Dick Scripture, that was her husband.
Okay, her husband, Dick Scripture.
Richard Scripture.
Richard Scripture, okay. This enclosure right here is known as the Lamb Cemetery. It's being the northwest corner of this home cemetery. And I remember a Mr. Albert Lamb, and I think his wife was a Bowers. And those two families live just very close to here. We can't get inside here to see who these graves are, but we do know that they are Lamb descendants. Okay. And they spelled their name L-A-M. Most of those spellings were L-A-M-B. The Lots were descendants of this family.